Let's see, Senator Roblan, I see you're having a little snack and maybe you weren't wanting to go first.
Yeah, no problem.
But if you wouldn't mind providing a little bit of a state update, legislative action, anything like that you have.
Be glad to. We haven't been doing anything. Oh, that's actually not true.
I think I have found the problem then.
We had a e-board meeting and we gave out a bunch more, or gave the governor, the executive branch, the ability to actually spend some of the money that they have received from the federal government. So started out with a couple of items that were on the previous e-board meeting that we didn't take up. One of the first one is 25 million more for small businesses. We have been very frustrated at the length of time it has taken that money to get out to businesses, since the first few dollars that we gave out months ago just got into the hands of businesses the last few days. So that's been frustrating. So we tried to figure out, could we make this possibly go quicker? So 5 million of it we gave to the previous program, because that was about how much requests they had gotten but didn't have the money for. And then we put another $17.5 million into a newer program. It's the second part, which goes out to credit unions, other kinds of institutions to give out money. And we feel that process has moved faster actually than did some of the other stuff. So we're hoping that will continue. And then we took $2.5 million from that and gave it to the fishing industry on the coast, because they have been hit hard. And we recognize that a lot of their stuff is now being frozen, which means that they will get less money in the future when they sell their other products, because there's already a lot of extra product. And then they've been also, that industry has been hit hardest on the coast with respect to COVID. So that was that one. The second one had to do with $75 million for venues. And in that particular one, we were concerned when we originally saw it that all the stuff was going to Portland. And Dave would say that it's still going to Portland, though I tend to vehemently disagree. But they keep bringing it up because the things that got direct payments did include a lot of venues in the valley, a lot of the issues that had to do with the stage performances. And that's true, because they, as a group, got together and came with a proposal that said we would just like to get some of the rent that we can't pay because we haven't been able to open. And they came up with a proposal that was reasonable and easy to look at, easy to verify what their costs are. And so we have that directly being paid by DAS, along with some of the bigger events that go around, the Pendleton Roundup, the museum at the High Desert Museum, the Ashland Theater, the issues that have to do with the Portland Metro. Portland Metro's lost over $60 million. We gave them about $4 million to cover some of the costs that we thought could be actually attributed to COVID. And so we came up with a group that took almost half the money, but not quite, and gave those directly, because again, we have a hard time giving money to the department and then waiting 6 months for it to get distributed. The other $26 million that was out of that 50 million is still out there to be given out. And we gave it to the Cultural Trust embedded in Business Oregon to get it out to county groups. So all of you have county groups that have given money out from the Cultural Trust over the last number of years. We thought that was the best way, because none of us knew the 1,600 different venues that exist out there. And we felt that the Cultural Trust group actually did know that. This will be the largest amount of money they've ever given away. We set it up in such a way that all of those that got money directly were out of that list. So they're gone. They don't get any more. We also disproportionately gave it to rural areas as opposed to urban by a formula that has a base amount going to places that are very small. We anticipate that some of those counties will not have enough venues to give the money away to, and so anything that's not spent will come back into the pool to be given out to others. So when all of that gets done, we anticipate that it will look a lot more regionally dispersed in the final analysis. And that was our best chance at getting it to people who knew how to spend it and where it would go. Our hope was that they would spend it on organizations that actually have employees and that are not all volunteer, and that programs that will probably make it back when we come back out of this, because spending money on organizations so that they can get rid of their debt before they close is not necessarily our hope. Our hope is that at the end of the day, those venues will return in those cultural events around the state. And we made it specific so people know that that includes county fairs. It includes a lot of other kinds of issues. We then gave $60 million to African American organizations. There was a Black CARES Act that was proposed, and we had a lot of information about. They are going to give that money out to different organizations to support people that were hit hardest by the pandemic. And like the coast, who had 26% unemployment up and down the coast, African American businesses and African American people are also in that 26 to 27% unemployment. So they made their case and they got some of that money. In that other one that we had just finished up talking about, we did take $320,000 and give it directly to the Oregon Coast Community College, because at the end of the day, when they started distributing money to community colleges, the Oregon Coast had been working on getting their certification. It had come in, but not before they started distributing the money. And so they gave all small colleges at least $500,000, except Oregon Coast Community College got $180,000 because they were a part of the Portland Community College. So we made them whole by giving them $320,000, and Dave worked really hard on coming up with some of those proposals, so we can talk about that one. We also took care of a water issue with the Warm Springs Reservation. They haven't had good water for a long time, so $3.5 million to get the studies and get them on the right road to recovering a water system for their community. And then there were 2 or 3 other proposals that came out, and that was kind of what we did. I'm also on the reopening schools work group for the governor. There are 47 of us on that, including students as well as superintendents, teachers from all over the state. It's a pretty well represented group, trying to give some input to the Department of Ed and all of the suggestions and requirements they are giving for schools to reopen. We know that 197 school districts will make their individual choices. That's what their boards do, and that's the way the state of Oregon is set up educationally. So we're trying to figure out what's the best information. And I will tell you that the most impactful group on that group were the students who expressed their opinions about things, and they came from Southern Oregon, from rural places, as well as metropolitan. All of them had the same feelings that kids are asked to do a lot more these days. Many of them are doing all of the family health, child care. They're also trying to learn. The online is not working that well for all of them. They have a discrepancy between who has it and who doesn't have it. There are problems with respect to not being able to socialize. It's driving them crazy, and they know they have a lot of friends that are having a lot of mental health issues right now because they don't have interactions with people. We know that child abuse is not being reported at the same rate. And yet severe child abuse issues, the things that show up at your county's advocacy centers, broken bones and all sorts of stuff with little kids, are happening at a higher rate than they ever have before. So we know it's happening out there. It's just the reporters are not having interactions with kids because schools aren't in action. So we know we have a lot of issues. The state knows that last year when we just closed schools and instantaneously had to do some distance learning, it was not a good program. So the new requirements for a distance learning program are much more requirement laden with how to make sure that it's a good program. A lot of school districts are looking at having some kids some days and other kids other days, and a whole lot of modifications. Everybody knows it'll cost a lot more because all the buses have to be cleaned down every time they're between deals. You've got to also make sure that desks and stuff are clean. When kids go out to play on the playground, they have to wash their hands before and after. So a lot of timing that happens in schools is going to be lost to education. So there's just an awful lot of stuff going on right now. And this committee is supposed to be trying to give insights as every time the department comes out with a new set of expectations and regulations, which come out almost daily these days. So I do not envy people in the education field right now, trying to figure out how do we get things going again in September. So that's a little bit of what I've been doing.
Well, thank you. And I apologize for being a little bit late. I was helping take care of my dad at the coast. And
Thanks for visiting.
apparently it takes 1 hour. And so I did wave actually at Representative Gomberg as I drove past his place.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mayor Wojtowski, for getting us going. It takes 1 hour and 14 minutes, and I was hoping it would take 1 hour and 12 minutes. So
Gomberg makes it 73 minutes in 53 minutes. I don't understand why you take so long.
It's a good question. I have more of a healthy respect for OSP.
Okay.
Yeah.
He knows that when he's in session, they can't arrest him anyway. So it's another issue. Separation of powers. It's really quite nice for us. You know?
I was going to say all sorts.
Drive to McMinnville.
Right, exactly. Yes, I was going to say all sorts of things about showing up for work, and I'm choosing not to right now. But thank you for that really great overview of both what the e-board has been up to and your work on it, and also with the schools, the reopening council. So, or I think that's not quite what it's called, but do we have questions specifically about school stuff for Senator Roblan? Mayor Kate?
My boss would tell me, no, I do not.
Well, I would say that I speak we have lots of customers of our farm who are teachers, and I hear a lot of concerns. So mostly about how, one that I had that I wanted to make sure that I expressed or shared with Senator Roblan was around a concern with the cohort models and distance learning versus in class. One teacher said that she is going to be seeing 175 kids a day and isn't sure really how she's going to do that. And then there's a concern about if some students are distance learning, and the teacher, apparently for some school districts, that there'll be a teacher who is doing their distance learning and then one who's doing their in-class learning, and there was concern about the continuity there of the relationships. So I just throwing that out there for you, those are two concerns for them. And then I don't know where the money's coming from.
They're realistic concerns because every school district is doing that differently. So the cohorts can be arranged in a lot of different ways, and some schools were saying, oh, we're just going to have a cohort of 1,500, which is the total school. That doesn't make a lot of sense. The issue is if you get a sick student with a COVID and they're in a cohort group of 20 people, then the 20 people are who you have to watch and make sure you keep them away from the rest of them. You don't have to keep everybody away from everybody else, and you don't have to close the school down so quickly. So it's trying to figure out how that works. There's some schools over in the Pendleton area that have got some really amazing plans going on right now. They've even got rooms where they will take and quarantine kids who have been near people who have it. I mean, it's pretty, there have been some very in-depth conversations going on about how to go about doing this. But again, at the end of the day, every school district will make their own decision. And that's going to be interesting to watch. And I agree, all of those issues are going to be big ones. You know, I visited Germany when I was a teacher, when I was an administrator, and looked at theirs. And in most of their high schools, they are in cohort groups. They have 25 kids in a classroom. The teachers move from classroom to classroom. The kids stay in the same room. They decorate it. It is their space. And they all have to take math and science and everything at the same level. So the equity issue is not a big issue. It's just that some kids aren't as good in math as others, but the teacher is responsible for everyone in that cohort to get what they need to have. And there's some really good advantages to some of it. So it'll be interesting to see what we do. The problem is that same cohort, how do we get them to school as cohorts? You can't do that with bus groups and a whole bunch of other kinds of issues that make it really a difficult concept to come up with. So
yeah,
that's what we've been expressing and talking about. And that's what this group's, when you get 47 people, many of them are also health professionals, all trying to come to some kind of an agreement on a plan. You find out how complex it gets very, very quickly. And all of those concerns that those teachers have expressed to you are real concerns.
And thank you, Senator. Is there my last question before checking in. Mayor Wojtowski, did you have anything you wanted to comment on as far as school, or?
Does she care about schools?
I'm pretty sure she does.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know, right? We're
Maybe
blessed.
government people care about schools.
I know.
On occasion. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Beth. Hey, Casey, I just have a couple
Yes.
comments for Senator Roblan while he's on here. First of all, Senator, I'd like to thank you for participating yesterday in our Parkway Committee meeting. I think you understand the needs for finishing the Newburgh-Dundee bypass, especially for the coastal areas, and tying the wine country and metropolitan area in with the coastal community as far as tourism. My question is this, and so I just want to thank you for being on that. My question is, I joined a little late on the cultural trust money that comes to the counties for cultural trust. When that comes to the counties, is it earmarked separately for cultural trust, or how does the county know that that money is being come to the county for cultural trust?
Every county has their own organization that deals with the cultural trust. It is that group, most of them are volunteers, that will have the actual decision to give the money away. And yes, the money has to go to cultural venues or events.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Mayor?
Yeah. I'm sure that Senator Roblan has heard most of the questions, that I would have among the 47 members of this group. Some things that I, want to say publicly, though, like you said, I don't know where the money's coming from. I'm very, very concerned. I empathize with trying to deal with a plan like that with 47 people. I was a part of the leadership team in our district that only had about 15 people, and it was still really hard to try to have these discussions and write out our plan. But I see really significant hurdles into putting any of it into action without a pretty significant shift and increase in our funding, when we have to, we've been trying, we talk all the time about needing smaller class sizes. We haven't been able to, effectively make smaller class sizes through all of the other efforts, but somehow we're going to have smaller class sizes. And we need to, because if each kid has their 35 square feet of space, I'm sure not going to put 32 kids in my classroom anymore. I'm down to 14. I don't know how that's going to be done. I also expressed concern the other day, and I know I kind of called on Mayor Cape too on this, but what's going to happen as teachers get ill? And your phrasing earlier was if a kid is tested positive for COVID, and to me that's a when.
Yeah.
And it's a how often. And when kids get sick, teachers get sick. I don't know how we're going to keep these spaces physically supervised, let alone receiving really highly effective instruction when we've already been in a teacher shortage, when we've already been in a sub shortage, and now we have. I know there's a couple of unions that are talking about renegotiating contracts. I'm concerned that this may result in a labor strike, that this could, really worsen those shortages. And, there's a lot to this. And I also am sort of stuck. I wear lots of hats in the discussion, as I'm a parent of 3 young children. 2 of them are school age, and 1 who is in daycare while I teach. And I'm not sure about the safety of sending my kids to any of those locations. And you could probably hear in my voice, I myself am sick right now. My husband and I were talking about whether or not I needed to go in and be tested for COVID. We have been very careful. I only go grocery shopping and essential shopping once or twice a week. We have groceries mostly delivered. I always wear a mask. We wash. I've taken my kids to the playground 1 time. We have socialized with only 3 families in 4 months. And all the precautions aside, I still woke up Tuesday morning with sniffles and a sore throat. So, taking all those precautions, I'm hoping obviously that I just have a minor cold, which is what it feels like. But I just know that all the precautions in the world and you can still get sick. So I'm really concerned as to what's going to happen when our teachers start getting sick in the fall and there's nobody to cover these classrooms.
Yeah, we've had conversation about PPE. There's not enough of it around for medical deal. We need PPE in every one of our schools. We need them for our bus drivers. We need them for kids that can't afford it themselves. I mean, it's a major issue with regard to making sure schools could open. We don't have enough testing, and we don't have testing that's fast enough that really helps us understand whether the kid we're going to be going back to school. The regular flu season is going to hit. How do we discern between a regular flu and this other kind of flu? All of those are major contributions to the complexity of how we get this stuff to happen. So I really appreciate your stuff and the fact that every school district is taking it seriously and trying to come up with a plan that works. The smaller class sizes, the only way I have seen any way to do that is to make sure that you double shift. So you have some kids come out on 2 days a week and another kids on 2 days a week. And then the fifth day, teachers are trying to touch base with each one of them through online resources of some kind or distance learning of some kind or another. But and then figuring out ways in which kids that need extra help can maybe come in on that fifth day. Special eds kids, special needs kids, all of the kinds of auxiliary stuff that we do in schools to help kids catch up that aren't up there with everybody else. Figuring that out is a logistics nightmare, and it makes me thankful that I'm not in education right now, other than from the standpoint of looking on from the outside and coming up with my smartass suggestions for people. At least I like having the opportunity to be a part of it. But I will tell you, the more I watch it, the more I understand how totally overwhelming it is to try to think about how we do this safely.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to speak for everybody here by saying that I'm glad for your smartass comments and ideas on behalf of a lot of us around here. So thank you. Yeah. So that leads to my question, which is any sense of federal funding coming into the state for students and schools?
That's the reason we have not had a second special session dealing with the budget is that we're waiting to see. And originally my co-chair said, oh, they're not going to give us any more money. And now I've always said, oh, yes, they will. And they're finally coming around to agree with me that they probably will. I know that our last vice presidential candidate, Kane, has been looking at putting together a very large education package because he knows that they need it in the school districts that he deals with. And so I anticipate that there will be a new package coming out at the end of this month that will give some more money. We would love to take some time to think about that and figure out how it coincides with the little resources that we have. But at some point in August, we will have a special session to cut budgets. I mean, we've got all this money to give away coming from the federal government, but the reality is the state of Oregon can't print money, and therefore we know we have less money to work with in the future, and we will have to figure out what that looks like. The co-chairs budget ramifications they put out, it's online now, so you can look at what they are recommending. And I'm already getting conversations. They're closing a corrections facility down in the Coos Bay area, which is going to cost jobs and a whole bunch of other kinds of things. So the ramifications, when you look at the recommendations from the co-chairs, are widespread, and people need to recognize that that's the next kind of thing that we have to deal with. Hopefully some of the money coming, and I believe there will be another tranche of money from the federal government, can be helpful in helping us deal with some of that.
Okay.
And I expect there'll be another big drop of money, actually. And I hope they have a bunch for schools, because I think everybody is starting to recognize that we cannot do schools as regular. It's going to cost more money to do it. And I've been heartened. We put $20 million into infrastructure for broadband and other things. I've had a couple presentations recently. That $10 million that was for private business to work with counties to extend it, we got $47 million worth of on the ground, ready to go projects, which is far exceeding anything that anybody thought we were going to get. Link and their 10 million are really working towards getting it into southern and the southeastern and northeastern Oregon. So that's pretty good. I had a presentation yesterday. The coast really has a fair amount of internet capacity already, dark fiber already being laid. We need to figure out how to get to every one of those little places, and our rural electric co-ops and others are starting to take hold and become their own providers, and that's getting exciting to me. So We will, and there's a whole bunch of money coming from the federal government to extend and make that better. We're for just basic internet, not enough to really do what you should. 25 megabits, which isn't enough anymore to do anything with. We're the second most covered state in the union. So it's kind of amazing, actually, because we have been working on this for a while with rural broadband and other kinds of stuff. But most of that is not capable of doing the telemedication or the educational stuff because it isn't reliable enough and have enough bandwidth. But we have to get better at that as well.
And Senator, it looks like Shannon Buckmaster is ready for you.
Okay. And Dave looks like he left me.
All right.
Thank you, Senator Roblan, for the update for the news. Thank you also for the fireside chat earlier this week. That was a nice contribution to our community.
We do that every Tuesday evening. So if you want to watch more of them, they are every Tuesday. We've been doing it now for 5 weeks. So
I see that now that I went to your Facebook page. So it was great. You know, sometimes we think people are catching our messages, but maybe you need to have said it for 5 weeks in a row before I realized that
exactly.
This was the week we were going to start to do that.
So did you watch the treasurer one?
Yes.
Last one? Okay, good.
Portions of it. I was double booked for work events for the evening because
they are archived.
We're flexible like that.
Go back and look at them anytime. They are archived on Facebook.
Yes, thank you. 2 comments to put out there as you consider how to distribute the funding for schools that you're considering. First of all, recognizing that because it's an individual school decision and not all school districts and not all campuses within school districts are created equally, we have a real risk of widening the socioeconomic gap and learning experience. And this is not something that will just affect this year's students or you know, this generation's of graduating class, but we know how systemic educational deficits repeat for generations. So I would just really caution us to look at the most vulnerable communities and prioritize those educational needs. We're even starting to see statewide and national trends just in the difference between how private schools are able to respond versus public education, right? Because it's a different set of resources, a different set of opportunities. So I would just encourage you to think about that. And then also to look down the road that whatever the school year looks like, it will dramatically impact our workforce, the ability to get people back to work, to sustain their work. We can't ignore that as much as we like the feeling of schools as educational places, schools also are critical for providing social services, not just the mandatory reporting, which has already been brought up, but childcare. And private childcare opportunities are at a significant deficit right now. And without a school district, and even with cohort models, you know, trying to manage that for different families, different grade levels, siblings, shared parenting situations, we're also at risk for really damaging our economic opportunities for a workforce returning to work as we understand even better. We're learning how to do business more safely, right? Each week that we get into this. And so those are the 2 cautions that I would love to communicate to our elected officials here.
I will tell you clearly that the equity issue is forefront of everything the department is doing. They are trying to figure out how to make that happen and how to force the issue with respect to equity. I actually agree with that 100%. I'll tell you that one of the biggest frustrations as a high school principal was that over the years since the 1950s, when we solved the polio epidemic in this country by making sure that every child had to be inoculated before they could come to school, and they found out that they could use schools for social engineering for everything else, the stuff that's been piled onto schools is enormous. And like you're talking about, we feed the kids, we house the kids, we do before and after school so that we can do child care for kids. I mean, the list of things, just immunization issues and keeping track of all of that for every kid. The kinds of social things that we do in schools has compounded our job 10 and 11 fold since the 1950s when it started. When I went to Germany, one of the shocking things was they don't have school lunch programs. Kids bring their lunch, that's it. That's your choice. They don't have libraries in their schools because the city has a library. Why would you need to have a second library at the school? all the things that we take for granted that schools do, many of the other countries in the world only do education. The rest of it is left up to parents and society. In our country, that has not been the case. And whether people like it or not, we have filled in a whole lot of roles that otherwise would have been done by the city, the local governments, and others in our school systems. And I think this pandemic has exposed that a lot. And I think that people are going to have a different appreciation, not only for teachers who are providing a lot of those care and issues for kids, but for the system itself. And I hope we recognize that as we try to go forward, because I agree with you wholeheartedly that there's a lot of issues here.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Shannon. Yes, and thank you, Senator. Any more questions for Senator Roblan? All right, thank you for covering a lot of ground and telling the community really like what's going on with the emergency board and the state in general. I think a lot of people, I know that a lot of people in our community wonder what is happening. So thank you.
And I just want to say one last thing too, you know?
Yeah, please.
I hear in my 7 counties that are part of my district, I hear a lot of conversations with different people. Some people are really upset with the governor. Some people think the governor's doing a good job. All I can say is I look around the country and I watch what other governors are doing. And I would much rather live in Oregon today than I would like to be in Georgia or Florida or Texas, or the list goes on. And I don't know that anybody was prepared to deal with this. But as I look at what we have done in the state, even though our numbers are on the rise, our rate of infection in the state of Oregon is still one of the 2 or 3 lowest in the country. We've got more cases coming, and it's going up a little bit, but it's still under that 10% that was kind of the keystone we were trying to get to when all the stuff was happening in New York. And for most of the time, it was under 5%. And I'm not exactly sure what it is right now, but it's still pretty remarkable that we are where, 6%. It is still pretty remarkable where we are in comparison to the rest of the nation. So the actions that people are taking here, and in particular the governor's office, all I can say is I'm happy that I'm in this state dealing with what we're dealing with that I am in some of these other places. And I have family in a lot of these other places who are not as happy and having similar conversations about whether they'll send their kids back to school or not. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator. And Shannon gave you a comment for that too. That thank you. I must say that I have obviously limited experience in government, but in the first year and 4 things could happen, or when things happen, how slowly. And then from March 12th through really, this week, I'm amazed at how fast things have happened. Decisions and policies, bans and mandates and releases exceptionally quickly, and even at the county level. And Commissioner Olson's got a little smile on because he's seen how fast our county has moved with things that we put off for years and years and years. So I think it's important. It was instructive for me to see how fast we can move in an emergency. Okay, thank you very much. Oh.
I'll end by saying I have been impressed with the more I've gotten to know Yamhill County. It's a very small part of my district, as you know, but the Parkway conversation shows the clear commitment that so many community members have to try to make it a better place. I am very impressed with the quality of local leadership in trying to get things done as well as they can, and understanding that we don't have as much money, so we have to cut corners. The different ideas that came up from mayors in different cities with respect to that were impressive to me at the engagement level that people get in those every 2-month meetings that we had with respect to the Parkway. So it's been a good experience for me to get engaged with people. Though Shannon was really quiet in that meeting. I don't think I heard her say one word, but I saw her picture over a little frame. So that was good.
I will say I now know more about highways than I ever expected to know in my life. I was certainly more active when we were lobbying for federal. I was actually able to attend the federal lobby trip with Mayor Hill, Mayor Russ, Mayor Rogers, a few others, and we've worked on state lobbying as well too. So It was just that one meeting I was quiet. I stay active and engaged.
I was impressed. Thanks.
You're an excellent Uber guide too, Shannon.
Yes, it was my job to navigate the Uber app and transfer that to my travel companions. So thank you.
Thanks.
It's good. I mean, I knew you had lots of skills. So any last questions? I mean, Senator Roblan is here, but I want to make sure that we get around the circle, as it were.
Right.
And I did also text David Gomberg, and I said, where did you go? And he said, well, do you need me? And I said, well, maybe more want than need.
That's right. Good. Thanks.
Yeah. So he will pop back on in a few minutes, I think.
Okay.
But Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell people today?
Well, Casey, I don't have a lot to say. I can say that I'm very pleased over the way things have gone the last week. Our economy is turning around. We're seeing a lot more people adhering to the mask regulations, but we're also seeing a lot of people in our downtown areas, in our restaurants, eating outside, which just flabbergasted me, the amount of people we have. And the city already wants, or a lot of the merchants are talking about, gee, can we do this even if COVID didn't exist? Can we do this all summer from like Memorial Day to Labor Day? Because it's really made a difference in their business. So we have a lot of people coming in from out of county that are coming to McMinnville, I'm supposed, an Uber to just to eat and taste the wines and then leave and say, I've heard people tell me, gee, I've never been to Yamhill County. I didn't know what Newburgh was like. I didn't know what McMinnville was like. I didn't know what Carlton was like. The scary part about that is the more they find out, I think the more we're going to see an influx of population. But like Beth said, I am very concerned about the schools. I don't know if we have any solutions, because this my neighbor who's a teacher brought up the other day about exactly what Beth brought up about what about substitute teachers? You know, what do you do if you have to get a substitute teacher? And I think that's very valid. But the biggest thing I don't think we're working fast enough on, as you know, is we need to work faster. And I've always been a believer in rural broadband. We need to work faster on rural broadband. We're making good progress, but if we don't make excellent progress in this next 6 months to a year, a lot of our kids that are out in the rural farming areas are going to be left behind in distance learning. Their families are going to be left behind in rural health and distance health support, and that's really a concern of mine. And that's about all I have, Casey.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Do we have questions for Commissioner Olson? The one I have is, I apologize, maybe I'll, Commissioner Olson, was there anything of particular note on the AOC call today? Because I was helping my dad binge.
I would like, Casey, I'd like to say yes, but I was on a NACO Healthy Counties call, since I sit on the subcommittee and board for the National Association of Counties Healthy Counties Council. And so I didn't make the call this morning either. So I'd like to tell you there's a lot of good news, but I don't know.
Well, I would imagine the LFC call is probably a good overlap, but and Mayor Hill might speak to that. But Mayor White, ask you, what would you like to say? Maybe in response to Commissioner Olson.
Can you hear me clearly? Because it looks like I'm having internet issues. Yeah, okay. It must just be with my video feed. You know, Commissioner Olson, you made one comment about a lot of people coming in, and, you know, it's been really good for our businesses, and they're expanding out the 3rd Street kind of experiment, I think is pretty amazing. I've said to a couple family members, really similar to your notion of, well, when we're out of a pandemic, I really hope to see that continued. It's just a really cool thing to have all the outdoor dining in general. But to the comments on people coming in, that honestly is a pretty big concern for me. I have a sister who is in management at a local hotel, and, you know, she has shared a little bit of her experience with me. A lot of their visitors right now are from the hottest infection spots in the country, because those folks want to leave their areas that are in a more locked down state and come to Oregon and enjoy moving a little bit more freely. that's concerning for me, that's what their guest registry looks like right now. So I do have some questions about that as well. I'm wondering, of course, this is a policy matter, so I wouldn't expect any kind of real response or debate in this type of meeting, but I know, Hood River and Cannon Beach, and this week the city of Bend have issued sort of anti-tourism statements or changed some policies to at least temporarily discourage tourism so that their local residents can move more freely and feel a little safer in their home communities. And I'm wondering if Yamhill County is looking at anything like that, or if you maybe on any of the AOC discussions are hearing about broader counties taking that kind of direction in terms of tourism and out of the area visitors.
Sorry. Can you repeat those counties?
Go ahead, Shannon.
Can you repeat those counties or those areas? You said Cannon Beach, Hood River, and
Bend. The city of Bend voted this week to actively discourage tourism and ask their hotels to stop booking new short-term reservations.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, Beth, I think, that's one of my concerns I mentioned earlier, that we're getting a lot of that influx from not just out of the county, but out of state. And my concern is exactly what you said. Some are coming from hot spots. We don't know. I haven't seen any reports that says, like, through Visit McMinnville, exactly where our bookings are coming from. My thing about it is I think you could put it, if the right wording is used, and I'm familiar with Ben's, if the right wording and verbiage is used, I think you can discourage it without really discouraging it. But Ben's was a word, basically, they just basically said, stay away. And I think that's not a very good message to put out. And I've talked to a couple of the Deschutes County commissioners, and they're going to put out another statement. But I agree with you. And I don't want to see it, even from an economic standpoint, because what we're doing is we're trading economic stimulus from people coming in. We're trading that, and the trade-off is we have our own residents that aren't going out as much because of that. And so I think it's a fine line to walk, but I totally agree with you, Beth. It is a big concern.
Yeah, and just for clarification on kind of the narrative, Ben's message was essentially, please don't visit before Labor Day. We are not ready to have visitors here. Hood River's was, if you can't follow all of the state's guidelines, then don't come here. But they sort of had that caveat of, if you're going to follow all the guidelines and be a courteous guest, and I believe Cannon Beach is calling theirs a shift to culture of safety. I think that's their phrasing, is we're establishing a culture of safety, which again is very focused on compliance to the state guidelines. So I do think that narrative is a little bit different between those communities, and I'm sure there's lots of others. I'm only familiar with those three, but and again, as in terms of the lodging, all I have is anecdotal comments from my sister, but I know she's dealing with some of the out-of-state visitors actually being, she probably wouldn't appreciate me sharing this, but almost a little bit aggressive with, if she's wearing a mask, they'll say, that you don't need to wear a mask. That's dumb. Trying to put down our guidance here, even though they are leaving a hot spot to visit. So it's interesting. It's complicated. And I just am interested in kind of following that discussion in Yamhill County.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing to have. Maybe in a work session we'll bring up, because we can't discuss it here. Maybe in a work session we'll bring it up. It's just to mention. I'll take a look at Cannon Beaches and Ben's again, and I'll take a look at Hood Rivers. I like what you said about Cannon Beach is what they're doing. I think that's a good message to put out. You're not discouraging it, but you're not encouraging it either. You're not encouraging it either. And hopefully that'll get more local residents out who are afraid to come out because so many people coming in. Thanks, Beth.
Yeah, along those lines, Mayor, or mayors, there's so many people here who should be addressed as mayor. I believe, based upon what I read, at least in the Oregonian, that the Bend one was not anything kind of binding. It was simply a statement of don't come here, as opposed to you can't come here. Was that correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. On Tuesday, they essentially adopted a statement that does officially discourage tourism, though.
Right. I also observed that it was on a 4-3 vote. You know, but it's something that I've asked our HHS director. Basically, I asked, are there any steps that you recommend right now that are different than what the governor and the OHA guidance is for our county's particular situation? And I ask her that kind of every time she gives us an update, which is on a daily basis. But what Director Manfred's response is if we're seeing double-digit cases, new cases on a daily basis, then we need to talk. So that was honestly very this we can assess this and take those appropriate measures. And for me personally, I do worry about people coming from other areas where there's a lot of cases, but that goes unfortunately for parts of Oregon too. So, and I know that the governor and Senator Roblan referred to this a little bit, but the governor's office and OHA and really hard to keep everybody open for business while still finding the things that they can do to reduce case counts and transmission. But something for us to continue talking about. And I would ask, what do you think, Mayor Hill?
Well, I did have an opportunity this morning to be a part of the LOC call, so let me just update very quickly for those that didn't make that. Leah Horner from the governor's office shared about the information that came out in outdoor social gathering of 10 or less. They also talked about the use of masks, youth sports, and the direction if we're involved in youth sports, the use of masks and distancing, growing numbers in Washington and California, that they may be looking at rolling back their phases as we are. We're looking at the opening of schools in September, but as our discussion has talked about, each district is different. There's great concern there. Sarah from OHA talked about 6.2% of our tests are coming back positive. Our goal is 5%, as we've talked about. Again, she talked about the small group gathering and the use of masks. Sonia from the Office of Emergency Management talked about how they're working with their partners, but Albertsons, Safeway, and Fred Meyer's are requiring masks to go into their stores now. That just happened this last week. Jason from Business Oregon talked about the money's coming through their department. But 52% are going to rural communities to date, and so that was encouraging for Yamhill County. And then Carolyn from the National League of Cities talked about what's happening back in DC with the legislative, the Congress and the Senate. Senate's going to be back, and they each have their own financing packages. Just a couple of things from my perspective. Yamhill County, again, we're running at about a 2.9% of those tested having a positive test. Again, the state is looking at 5, so we're under what we would be, we're under, at least in Yamhill County, that shows that I think we're pretty diligent. In McMinnville, area code 97128, we've got 73 cases within our zip code, and that's about 20 per 10,000 of individuals, and that's remained very constant. A couple of things I'd like to do that many have talked a little bit about. The first one is Dine in Mac, which is our weekend. We're having great success, but I think what I would like to share is that it is well orchestrated. Mask and all of the things that the state would ask us to do, plus the distancing, I think is a great model. I went down last Sunday. I was coming back into town, went down last Sunday, and it was just lots of people. And each week it's growing more and more. Had an opportunity to go into one of our without saying a name, one of our hardware stores in town. It was really interesting. There was a man with his two daughters, and as people walked into the store, if you were wearing a mask, they cheered you. And if you didn't, they didn't say anything. It was very obvious that they were there promoting the use of masks. And it was a very interesting way. My wife and I just looked and says, we know what they're doing. From a McMinnville standpoint, just to get out to our residents, we've got a grant in with the Business Oregon in their third level of giving for McMinnville, and the city still has about 100,000 that we're looking at matching. We're looking at MISO, and we're looking at the Oregon business, and so we feel like within the next month we're going to have some vehicle to help support for business recovery. We met with individuals from the hospital. We have capacity there. Again, getting a good report from that perspective. Met with Linfield this week, and again, they're looking at an open campus come August still, and they're opening up and they're looking at innovative ways of being able to provide education from that perspective. We talked a little bit about the motel, and I had an opportunity this last week to be a part of Visit McMinnville, and we've really curtailed the media piece of Visit McMinnville. We're concerned, we don't want to be bringing lots of people in, but for those local, we want them to know that we're still providing a good experience in McMinnville. The motels that are a part of the McMinnville area with Visit McMinnville, we're about at a 30% occupancy, just to give you an idea across the numerous motels in the McMinnville area. And then just the other piece, we talked to the senator and Rick. We were on our Dundee-Newburgh bypass, and I'll tell you, we saw some preliminary design work around the piece from Dundee to Dayton. And that's the first time we've had a very good discussion around that with not so much cost, but it was all ideas and how we could be working towards something that, if built, wouldn't be taken down 20 years later to do the right thing. And I was very uplifted to see the discussion that was happening from that perspective. The next 2 weekends, Highway 18 is going to be closed for work over the weekends, and so lots more traffic on Highway 99. And then for those in the city, again, you're very much aware that Old Sheridan Road project is going on through October. And I went down and took a look at that the other day, and good. That's going to enhance that south entry into the city. So with that being said, that's some of the things that I had to share this afternoon.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor. Questions? Mayor Wojtowski.
Mayor Hill, I missed this morning's call for the LOC. Would you mind sharing more about the comments related to youth sports? Because that's one of the big questions I get in my community a lot.
Yeah, Leah just, she talked about that, they've opened that up because of the distancing, but they're seeing the very, very strong words that said that the group gatherings have been the piece that they think are the uptick. And she was more concerned about the indoor social gathering of 10 and less in your home, in your backyard, and those types of things, because they feel that there isn't as much precaution. You come in, you're socializing, you think it's fine. Youth sports, all I put down is that youth sports, the use of mask and distancing, and they're not as concerned about that as they are about the social gatherings. So
Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions?
And Mayor Wojtowski, as you probably are aware, there's now 39 cases associated with the youth baseball team in Newburgh. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Are there any more questions for Mayor Hill? Okay. Oh, yes, Mayor Cape.
Sorry, I gotta get my phone to unmute me. I just think that's a great example of that couple that you mentioned, Mayor Hill, at the hardware store. And I think it would be so nice. I don't know how we can put more attention on that type of response, but it's okay. And I don't care if it's people have the other's view, right? They want to do the opposite, but find a positive way to have an interaction with people to show support.
Well, Michael, I think the one thing that really touched me, and I just mentioned, I think the family
have to be in that negative manner. You know, you don't have to boo and yell at or belittle somebody because they have a different opinion. So, man, that's a great story to hear, and I love hearing that type of response.
Well, and I'll tell you the thing that was heartening to me as I talked to the individual, I think he was more there to show his young girls, and those young girls were maybe 8 and 6, but it's something the family decided they could do proactively to promote safety within the community.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor Hill. And Mayor Witowski, I want to go back to you because you had comments on different things, but you never got to do a full, what do you want to tell the community update?
You know, I think today I've got to really ask the questions and have the discussions I wanted to have, which is about schools, childcare, the growing infections, the view on tourism, all those things. So I think I'm good for an individual message.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people today?
Yeah, I just kind of want to piggyback just a little bit on the LOC call today and some of the language that I really keyed in on coming from the governor's office. And that was, again, back to the schools. And the language that she used that I really paid attention to is the governor staff, they're looking for a plateau of cases before they will say, that 100% yes, we're reopening schools. They want to know we've hit that plateau and we're not getting worse as far as case counts and that we're moving in a positive direction. So that's something that I look as indicator of, in our numbers right now, we're going not in a good direction for that to happen. So I think that's something to look at. And also just reiterate what Mayor Hill said. And yes, I took the same message as well, as that it's those private gatherings or personal gatherings where people are being more relaxed on the mandates and on social distancing and wearing a face covering. And so to try and encourage that in order to hit that plateau so that we can look at a positive direction for us. So those are really the things that kind of stood out to me in that call. Other than that, I would reply to your teacher friend, Casey, 170 students a day. Welcome to the teaching. When I had 6-7 classes a day, averaging 40 kids per class. And so, you're looking at 200 kids a day. So that's education in today's world. I understand that that's difficult. And I think also one of the things that I'm hearing from teachers in Salem-Keizer is that childcare, daycare option is going to be huge too, because you're going to have teachers, and there's a huge percentage of teachers that have kids of their own, and they're going to have to go to work 5 days a week, and their children are going to be at school 2 days a week. So what do you do with your kids if you're the teacher and 3 days out of the week your kids don't have anybody to take care of them? And also it's the support people as well Yes, substitute teachers are going to be important, but all those support people that provide the supervision of students, because we don't want just kids running around with no supervision, because who knows what they're going to do, because they're kids. And so having enough people to provide that supervision, whether that's direct education or being out on the playground to give those kids some time to let their brains recoup and be kids. So, and then for me and in my role, my boss has just said, hey, here's the rules and the guidelines we got to follow. Now you, meaning me, go make the work instructions, and so that we can all follow these guidelines. And I know for us, it's a monumental task, because not only does the district have to have that plan that meets all those guidelines, but it's every school, and we have like 60 different elementary schools in Salem-Keizer, and they all have to have their plan and their work instructions, because every one of those buildings and campuses are different. So, and that, goes all the way up from elementary all the way to high school and beyond, because there's so many other services that people don't necessarily realize are happening for students. There's a lot of, there's students that are incarcerated that we have to take to and provide them with their education as well. And that happens in public schools. There's the McMinnville program students, which are students that are experiencing some form of homelessness or displaced homes, and we, in Salem-Keizer, we go out to Sheridan and pick up kids and bring them to Salem. We go to Portland. We go as far south as Eugene to get students, Lebanon, Albany, you name the city, and we go there to get students and back and forth, so there's a lot of different programs there. And how does that affect those students, and not just getting them to and from and whatnot, but they have the same rights to the same education as every other student. So if you're going to have sports, then you need to, and you have a student in that McMinnville program, for example, you need to provide an opportunity for that student to be engaged in sports, because if it's good for one student, it's good for all students. And so then it compounds that transportation issue. You got to go get that student that may live an hour away, bring them to the school, and then you need to get them back home. But maybe you also need to bring them back to have the sport, to be involved in the sports and athletics as well, or any other extracurricular activity. So just huge issues there. And I know Salem-Keizer, you mentioned the word equitable, and it's everywhere across our district right now. So anyhow, I'll stop. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Are there any questions or comments from Mary Kate? Okay, great. Well, we've successfully made it through an hour without going to an hour and a half. So congratulations, everybody. For closing today, I just want to note that the Oregon Health Authority has detailed kind of the extent of the community spread of coronavirus right now, that it's not just workplace outbreaks, it's not just social gatherings, it's not just baseball games, and it's not just bars and taverns and restaurants. And so I want to express to the community to please take caution, and please note that when the state, the OHA, or even the CDC presents guidance about something with coronavirus, even if it seems different than what you understand to be the world, that these are people their life's work is to figure out how viruses spread and how they interact with the public. This isn't a YouTube video from a person who's wearing scrubs, which I get sent those all the time. And and I just want to acknowledge that our epidemiologists are trained for these events, and they're here working night and day for us. Just like the people who are on this call are. I want to encourage people to really think hard about each decision you make. Especially, I know that for me in the last few weeks, I've started to have more social interactions, even though they're still distanced, and I'm going to be pulling those back. And I think that we need to right now to keep things at least stable, especially in case we need to have a plateau before school starts. Right, a lot of people are looking forward to the fall. So with that, any last comments? All right, thank you very much, and we will see you next Tuesday. And sorry I was late. And be safe out there, everybody.